Number 5. Ghosts and the Men in Black. Our first story comes to us from the internet's front page and a very reputable trusted news source, Reddit. A thread was posted asking Redditors, those who've encountered a cryptid, what happened? Now, it's worth a click through, there's a lot of good stuff in there, but our first story comes to us from a user, Amazing Banana. He describes being at a park with his partner, stargazing and enjoying the night. The park was smack dab in the middle between a little suburb and on the other side, some dense foresty area. As the two were sitting and cherishing the moment, making precious memories, our storyteller heard something coming out of the woods that sounded like somebody stomping around. Concerned about something suspicious happening, he looked up to try and see what was going on. He described seeing something walking around, hunched over and walking on 4 legs, wearing what looked like a white cloth over it. Naturally, he was pretty confused, so he asked his partner to describe the same creature as she looked at it, saying it also looked like something draped in a cloth. Scared and confused, the pair took off to their car to take off and leave behind whatever they'd seen. From here on, the two of them went out to another park to collect their bearings and saw a strange black, unidentified flying object that looked like a helicopter, but the OP said it didn't look like any vehicle he had ever seen before, describing it looking more like one of the vehicles from Avatar or Halo Reach. He said it flew in a way unlike anything he had ever seen. So what exactly was this? Was this a UAP and an extraterrestrial that they encountered in the park? Or perhaps, and this is just speculation on my end, could that have been a cryptid they saw? And the vehicle he saw afterwards was some sort of special government vehicle sent in to collect the sample? Black helicopters and the Men in Black, that kind of deal. The creature described could be something called a kune-kune, a Japanese urban legend of a cryptid that manifests itself as a thin, white sheet like a floating ghost. Now the OP never specified where the post was coming from, so who's to say? We may never know. If you like cryptid videos and you like UAP videos, I have got boxes of cryptid and UAP videos. Just check them out on the channel and hey, toss a subscribe if you're feeling generous. Number 4. The Enfield Horror. Enfield, Illinois was supposed to be just another calm, regular old Midwestern town. Sadly for the residents, it would be plagued by cryptid sightings, its most famous being the one named after the town, the Enfield Horror. The Enfield Horror was described as a short, squat beast with 3 legs, 2 small arms, and bright eyes like flashlights, standing a bit under 5 feet tall. It has leathery, wretched skin and is not the kind of thing you ever want to see. The first spotting of the creature was in 1973 by one Henry McDaniel, a local Enfield resident. One night at around 9:30, McDaniel and his wife returned home to their children, telling them they'd seen something scratching on the door. Later in the evening, McDaniel heard something scratching at the door as well. He went out to see what it was, expecting to see just a neighborhood dog, but instead was greeted by the entity now known colloquially as the Enfield Horror. McDaniel fired at the monster and claims he did hit it, but the beast shrugged it off and hissed back at him, and then bounded away in long leaps across the yard. He reported it to the police, who came to investigate, and they didn't help too much, but what they found was concerning. 6-toed footprints and patterns in a 3-footprint pattern. And later that day, there was another report of someone else being jumped by a creature that seemed remarkably similar to the creature described by McDaniel. And this is far from the only 2 sightings of the Enfield Horror. After this initial encounter, sightings popped up pretty frequently around Enfield. No one ever found the Enfield Horror, and whatever it was has never been confirmed. So it could still be out there. Number 3. Wolfman. Of all the monsters out there, especially like the Universal monsters, my all-time favorite are probably werewolves. I don't really know why, just absolutely loved them. I used to draw them in my homework as a kid all the time. I really wanted to be a werewolf. I was bizarrely obsessed with them, so I'm a sucker for anything about them. Take a listen to this story here. A reporter on BuzzFeed asked the BuzzFeed community if anybody had any interactions with cryptids, and this story shared had me howling. That's a little wolf pun for you. Okay, sorry, let's get into it. One night when there was a blood moon, I decided to try and get some good pictures and went to a secluded spot just outside of town. Pulling in, I noticed a tree had fallen by a nearby creek, right about where you'd park your car to fish. I started setting up my scope and camera, and I heard a lot of rustling around the brush. Coyotes are common enough, and I had my pistol on my hip, so I didn't pay it much mind. The rustling soon became more akin to something violently chasing through the woods. At this point, I stopped what I was doing and shined a light to try and see what it was, but I couldn't see anything. I was off-put by the sounds, so I started to pack in my stuff to leave when I heard some splashing. I turned on my light and I drew my gun, flashing it, and then I saw it. This 6-foot tall thing with what looked like the face of a wolf, but was too big to be a wolf or a coyote. It was as tall as I was. As the light hit it, it growled and charged at me. It barreled forward and disappeared into the cornfield. I left all of my stuff behind, and I came back the next day to find a farmer and some sheriffs. The farmer's sheep had been eaten the night before, so he'd been setting up trail cams and came across all of my things. I told them about what I saw, and they told me it was just a bear. But the tracks were definitely not a bear. Could that have been just a bear, and in a flash of fear and panic, he mistook it for a cryptid? Or could this have been a werewolf sighting? And he should have brought some silver bullets. Number 2, a ningin. A ningin is a cryptid I'd never heard of before, but after reading about it, I was instantly fascinated by it. It's described as a humongous, blubbery, whale-like creature, but there's a lot of variations on the creature depending on who's telling the story. Sometimes it's depicted as being kinda cute, to be honest. It looks a bit like a seal, beluga, or a dolphin. And sometimes it takes on a more humanoid, terrifying shape, kinda like a merman sort of deal. Interestingly, ningin is a Japanese word for human, implying that it should be more humanoid in description. It's described as being anywhere from 20 to 30 meters long, oof. And sometimes it's described as having a mermaid-like tail. Other times, having hands and hind legs. Basically, one of the few recurrences across all the legends is that it's got ghastly pale, white, blubbery skin, and it's described as having a very blank face, with black eyes being one of the only notable features. They're first described around the 20th century, with most sightings of them occurring around the 2010s. There was a possible sighting in 2006 when people said that they found evidence of a ningin swimming under ice on Google Earth, but from satellite photos, it can be a bit difficult to ascertain if that's actually what's going on. Still, reports and stories of this thing keep popping up, so it could still be out there. And finally, at our number 1 spot, Chupacabra. The Chupacabra is one of the most famous cryptids out there. Its name translates to goat sucker, and depending on the tale, the Chupacabra comes in many forms. Most often, it's described as being a quadrupedal, canid-like monster. But some depictions also describe it as being bipedal and more humanoid in appearance, and some of the really out there descriptions make it out to be like a little alien goblin looking thing. Over the years, there have been several reports of people who claim to have seen the Chupacabra, and even people who claim that they've felled the legendary beast. Most of these sightings though get attributed to coyotes with mange, which give off a sickly appearance and definitely do look demonic. Time and time again, the Chupacabra is debunked as just an urban legend or a misunderstanding, but goats keep going missing, and goats keep getting found with all their blood drained, so what's going on? It's spotted all throughout Mexico, Puerto Rico, and the southwestern United States, always propping up around livestock being drained of blood. So are there really a species of souped up super predator dogs out there? Recently, and maybe you've seen this weird photo going around, a strange bipedal furry-like creature caught international attention online when it was picked up by a trail cam just outside of a Texan zoo. Now there are some who claim that it could just be someone wearing a costume, but it looks a little too spindly for that. As well, skeptics raise that it could just be a coyote standing on its hind legs, which would make sense, but it does look a bit alien. It doesn't really have the stature of a coyote. I'm gonna be honest, if it looks like anything, it looks the most like it's Crash Bandicoot than it does a person in a costume or a coyote. So could this be the elusive Chupacabra? It's occasionally described as bipedal, and maybe it would explain why it's so elusive if it's able to sneak around like this. I just hope we get some answers on this thing. Number 5, Kamaitachi. I love doing videos and lists like these ones because I get to spend a lot of time researching into these different cultures and cryptids I never really would have known about without these opportunities, so thanks for watching stuff like this so I can keep on doing them. That's my greedy reason behind it. I just like learning. Our first cryptid from the land of the rising sun is going to be the Kamaitachi. This yokai appears as a weasel with razor sharp sickle-like claws. If you're a Pokemon head, big Pokemon fan, Sneasel from 2nd Gen, the dark ice type. He's based on a Kamaitachi. They've got spiny fur, similar to a hedgehog, and they bark like a dog, and they have razor sharp claws. These adorable, funny little guys are extremely lightweight, lighter than the wind itself even, and as such, travel by gusts of wind soaring through the sky like they're radical, furry little windsurfers. Legends of the Kamaitachi first came about in the Chubu region of Japan, notorious for its icy sharp winds that were so powerful they would blow men over. These legends then took the form of the Kamaitachi, the winds literally personified as this little vermin miscreant. It attacks you in the legs and it knocks you over. You're all exposed and helpless while it picks away at your vitals with its little sickle hands. These creatures are surgical when they strike. A Kamaitachi sucks away and feeds on any of the gore left behind by their wounds. These creatures are said to be totally stealthy, impossible to see with the naked eye, and blend into their surroundings well. And here's some pedantic little wordplay trivia. I know all the kids at home love pedantic wordplay trivia. There's some debate as to whether or not Kamaitachi's name is nothing more than a cheesy pun. There's a stance that old sword fighters in Japan would use called Kamaitachi, translating loosely to sword stance, and well, you can see if you just literally squish those two sounds together. And if you're looking for way more cryptid content, creepy tales, true stories, fake stories, aliens, conspiracies, horror movies, and basically just about everything weird and freaky that could possibly happen on this world, Top 5 Scary is the place to be. So hit subscribe, ring that bell when you do, and stay scared. But also stay watching this video, okay? Nothing I love more than seeing you guys watch them all the way to the end. Now let's keep going. Number 4, Teke. Coming in next is gonna be a fairly newer urban legend, but it gripped me so much I had to include it in this. It's the Teke. Teke is a legend about the ghost of a student who was slain when she fell onto a railway line, where she was then split in half by a train. No easy way to say that, might as well just get it out of the way. Much like an Onrio, which, hold on to that thought for now, we're gonna come back to that in a minute. She's a vengeful spirit of a wronged woman who lurks train stations at night, stalking out for her victims. She drags herself across the ground using her arms, dragging the spine sticking out of her torso, scraping across the ground, making a horrifying tick sound from where she gets her name. And you thought that was just like a cute little sounding name, didn't you? Nope. Try if you can. Just try to get the mental image out of your head of a ghost girl clawing along on just her hands and elbows and her spine following along behind her. She's also carrying a giant sickle with her, so there's that too. She's really not much of a farmer, so I'll tell you right now, she's not using that for crops. If she finds you, Teke will chase you and slice you in half. Whoops. Some variations say that she only takes your legs, which I guess is better, but really not by much. There's a specific variation of the legend that gives Teke a bit more backstory for her origin, saying her name is Kashima Raiko, and she's a specific entity. She died when her legs were severed from her body, and the next part gets a bit creepy, so you might want to grab onto something. Maybe put a little salt circle around your computer. It's said that when an individual learns of Kashima's story, she'll appear to you within the next month. So start timing now, I guess. Kashima Raiko is said to haunt bathroom stalls asking where her legs have gone. If you answer in a way she doesn't approve of, she'll take them from you. Incredibly bizarrely, most of all, this isn't the only bathroom themed horror story on this list, and I'm not joking, so we'll talk about that in a minute, but in the meantime sit tight and wait what I could possibly mean. Number 3, Kamakiri. Something I really like about reading about Japanese yokai and their mythological monsters when you read about a bunch of them is that they tend to kind of fall into 2 categories, you know? It's either the most terrifying thing I have ever heard in my life, a story of a malevolent spirit that's been wronged and will haunt you and do something unspeakable for a painful death, or they're just like weird little goblins or like weird little ghouls that go around doing silly little things. The Kamakiri is one of the silliest little demons I have ever read about, so that's why I'm including them, because they're hilarious. A Kamakiri looks like a weird little bird, like a little bird monster, with a razor sharp beak and very pointed claws. They're teeny tiny and very sneaky to move undetected. So what does the dreaded Kamakiri do? Are you ready for this? Hold on to something because this is going to terrify you. It breaks into your house at night and it cuts your hair. They hide in your roof and they wait at night for the perfect moment to strike, and then they go in and they just mess up your perfect do. They layer it all weird. They cut the ends right off. They frost your tips and they go after anyone. Okay? They're not picky. If you've got a head of hair, they want to snip it up. Only the baldies are safe now. They wait until you're asleep. And if you're wondering, you're just sitting there like, why would anyone tell a story about this monster? Why would anyone make this up? It was in periods of Japanese history when long hair was really the only fashion and accepted hairstyle. I would have done great. So the idea of a nobleman having his hair cut in the middle of the night was like spine-chilling. These days though, it just makes Kamakiri sound like he's like a college prankster than it does a real monster. But that's only half of why I thought this creature was so funny. Aside from the split end touch-ups, a Kamakiri cutting your hair is said to be a sign that the victim is about to unknowingly marry a yokai. Shapeshifters like Yorigumo or Kitsune can trick young men into marriage. So the Kamakiri steps in and he cuts your hair to let you know you might accidentally end up marrying a demon spider shapeshifter woman. And I just got paid to say that sentence out loud. We made it, ma. Kamakiri, you might win the top 5 scary award for one of the funniest cryptids we've ever talked about on the channel. A solid number 2 compared to my true favorite, Akaname, the demon that comes into your bathroom and eats waste, which I guess would make him number 2. That's the rudest joke I'll ever tell on this channel. I'm so sorry. You guys can cut that if you want. Okay, moving on. Number 2, Akamanto. The Akamanto, also known as the Red Cloak, is a masked spirit and may very well be one of the most evil, weird creatures I've ever heard described in folklore, so just wait till you get a load of this. Not like any good folktale, there are some local variations in how Akamanto operates, but the elements that remain consistent across all tales are that the Akamanto preys on you during your most personal moments. You know, he tends to come for kings who sit on a porcelain throne. He visits you in the smallest room in the house. He catches you with your pants down. This demon comes for you when you're on the toilet, if that isn't quite getting across yet. I didn't know how to just say it. The Akamanto then offers you a deadly choice. Pulls a little matrix on you and it asks you to choose between red toilet paper or blue toilet paper. Kind of like that one scene from Squid Games with the guy offering the paper. Actually, a little funny trivia, the creator of Squid Games confirmed this monster is what inspired that scene. So a little symbolism about that you didn't know about before and now you do. Now it's all a trick question, of course. Neither of the toilet papers this ghastly spirit has for you are anything like the Royale kittens. The red paper means you'll find yourself all cut up, leaving behind quite a mess. And the blue option means you'll be left gasping for air, clean but slow and painful. The only way to escape the Akamanto's dreaded game is to tell him you've got enough actually and thanks for asking but you're good. No, really, you just have to ignore him. Tell him you're good, or flush quick and hightail it out of there. You know, don't play it smart with him. Don't ask him for purple. Don't ask him for sandpaper. No wise guy answers. He's a toilet paper demon. He doesn't want to hear any of that. It's said that if you mess with him, you mess with the Akamanto, he drags you feet first into the underworld. At least he doesn't flush you. Why did they make that? Why did the backstory behind the toilet paper demon? I do not know. Okay, number 1, Onrio. And our number 1, I went with the Onrio. And Onrio translates almost literally to a vengeful spirit. And in every definition of the words, that statement rings true. They're also sometimes called hatred spirits because an Onrio is specifically a ghost of someone who is capable of causing grievous harm to the living. Onrio are almost always depicted as women who were wronged in their life. They're not exclusively women, but majority of them are. They were traumatized by their death, and they spend the rest of their days exacting revenge. God forbid women do anything fun, huh? Nailing down exactly what an Onrio is capable of is difficult because there are so many countless interpretations of the vengeful spirit, but just know at home that nothing good ever comes out of crossing an Onrio. You can expect things like sleep paralysis, telekinesis, curses, evil magic, like I said, really nothing good. It's worth noting that as part of the legend of an Onrio, her vengeance can never be satisfied, no matter how many enemies she fells in her wake. An Onrio will go after her lovers, family, whoever she had the most lingering pain for, and after she's done with that, well, she'll just attack indiscriminately. You gotta do something with the day, right? Onrio are a very traditional Japanese story, popping up in a lot of performance art pieces like No, Kabuki, and Rakugo, and they even continue to be the center stage in modern works. Probably the most famous Onrio I think most Westerners would know about is Sadako Yamamura from The Ring, otherwise known as Samara if you only saw the American version, and if you have, you gotta fix that at some point for me, okay? And Onrio traditionally is described as wearing a white barrio kimono. She's got wild, unkempt, long black hair obscuring her face, and in stage plays with dramatic white and blue paint, so just, she looks like the girl from The Ring, basically. And how does one stop an Onrio? Oh, you don't. Yeah, there's nothing. Once she's coming for you, she's coming for you, so, you know, be nice. Just be nice to the ladies in your life and hope that they never come back as vengeful revenge spirits. Number 5, the Fresno nightcrawlers. Starting off the list is going to be my favorite cryptids in the whole wide world, the Fresno nightcrawler. If you've never seen footage of them, it's going to change your life. Look at them. Look at the way they stride around like a pair of pants that came to life. These things are the absolute perfect cryptid to me. There's never been a story of them hurting anything or anyone. There's no livestock that goes missing when the nightcrawlers are around. It's just some chill dudes going for a late night stroll. I can really get down with the lifestyle that the Fresno nightcrawlers are about. The nightcrawlers were first spotted in Fresno, California, which makes a lot of sense why they're called that. They've been mostly spotted in California almost exclusively, a couple times, save for one reported sighting in Poland, so must have been a pretty long walk they were going on. The first recorded sighting was by a man in Fresno named Jose, who claimed that during the night he heard his dogs freaking out at something outside. He went to go see what his dogs were making so much noise about, and through a security camera system in his home, he saw the two little crawlers making their way around. He woke up his brother to come watch the footage as well, but by the time he'd awoken, the creature was already gone. The next morning, they called in investigators to inspect the lawn and the footage, but there was absolutely no trace of anything. No footprints, no spots, nothing. All they had was grainy CCTV footage of the night crawlers making their way down the lawn. Since their sighting, there's been endless debate as to just what the night crawlers are. Some suspect spirits or ghosts, because they do look kind of spectral in the video, but a number of people have also put forward the idea that the night crawlers could be visitors from another world. They don't look like anything on this planet, so maybe they came down. Who's to say? The only person who can truly decide is you. And hey, if you want to see loads more videos of things what might be cryptids or what might be aliens, then you already know the vibe. It's Top 5 Scary. We got more videos of cryptids and aliens that you could ever watch, but you're welcome to try. Stay subscribed and don't miss a scream. Number 4. The Enfield Horror. The Enfield Horror is a pretty notable cryptid in American history, and it gets its name from a small string of sightings when it terrorized the town of Enfield, Illinois. The creature has been described as a small, goblin-esque being. Oh, you know how I feel about goblins. It doesn't really resemble any living animals on this planet that it could very easily be described as. It's reported as having 3 legs and leathery skin and moving in a vaguely monkey-esque way compared to a baboon hopping around. So the first time the Enfield Horror was ever spotted, it was in 1973 by one Henry McDaniel. He and his wife had been out that night and were returning home and were greeted by their children. The kids had told their father that there was something they'd seen outside that was trying to get inside the house by scratching on the door. Mr. McDaniel initially assumed it was probably just a cat or a dog, but later on during the night, that peculiar scratching came back again at the front door. He went out to shoo the animal away and was shocked at what he saw. He described to police that it had 3 legs on it, a short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It stood 4.5 feet tall and was grayish colored, and it was trying to get into their house. McDaniel saw this weird little thing and thought best to rid the world of it and fired at it. He claims he struck the creature, telling police that, "When I fired that first shot, I know I hit." He says the creature hissed at him, claiming that it sounded like a wildcat hissing, and then proceeded to bound away in long leaps across the yard. The next day, police were alerted to the story and sent over to investigate the yard as to what happened. They didn't find much, but they did find 3-footed tracks throughout the yard. So just what on earth was the Enfield Horror? Or is that the operative word? Was it of this earth? Could it have been some animal that had lost a leg and was injured limping around? Or is it something that had slipped out of an enclosure from a UFO and was hopping around our planet looking for a new meal? Coming in at number 3 is the Chupacabra, one of the most famous cryptids maybe ever in urban folklore. For those somehow not in the know, the Chupacabra is often thought to be a canid-like monster, and is purportedly responsible for disappearances of livestock, predominantly throughout Mexico and the American Southwest, but also propping up in places like Puerto Rico. You know, a Chupacabra has been around whenever you find that your livestock has either gone missing or is found dead with all its blood sucked right out. This is actually where the name comes from. While most depictions of the Chupacabra almost always define it as being a coyote-like creature, albeit a twisted, mangled-looking one, usually described as a totally hairless dog with beady black eyes and a sleek figure. There are some stories and sightings of Chupacabras that describe it as being more like a demon or an alien, describing it as being a humanoid creature, often reptilian in nature, walking around on 2 legs and feeding on livestock. In all the years since Chupacabras have first been reported, though there are countless sightings, there's never been a fully recovered one that we couldn't explain. Everything that's been found by hunters always ends up turning out to be dogs with mange, being misattributed to being the cryptid. So maybe, is it possible that there's been a giant mix-up, and all the sightings of Chupacabras that report them as canines are just that, just sick sick dogs that get mistaken for looking something weird, and that the real Chupacabra is the reptilian, more bipedal sightings that get reported. It could explain why there's never been one recovered, and why livestock keeps going missing under bizarre circumstances. It's even possible that the drained livestock could be creatures that have been recovered to study, abducted under bizarre experiments. Could Chupacabras themselves be in a bizarre experiment that's been unleashed into our world? A hybrid chimera breed that was created by alien life and let loose on us to run havoc on us? Number 2. The Dover Demon. The Dover Demon looks outright like an alien, maybe more so than anything else on this list. Its description describes it as a pale, naked, leathery creature with a giant watermelon-esque head and no discernible facial features outside of 2 gigantic eyes. Kinda looks like Roger from American Dad. It looks like the exact depiction of a little gray man. The first ever sighting of the Dover Demon was in 1977 in the small town of Dover, Massachusetts. One Bill Bartlett was driving down the road with his friends late at night, until they saw something bizarre creeping along a low wall of loose stones on the side of the road. Initially, Bartlett assumed that it was just a cat, one of the most often mistaken creatures for cryptids. But as the headlights shone on it, he realized it wasn't like anything he had ever seen. The creature slowly looked up to stare at him, and he described it as having peach-colored skin with a rough texture akin to sandpaper. Not long after initially seeing the Dover Demon, it disappeared almost into thin air. The creature vanished. It's been wondered, actually, by cryptozoologists after this sighting if perhaps the creature had some sort of camouflage ability or some sort of transportation ability even. Given the extreme resemblance to little greys, the alien most commonly described as being the ones responsible for most abductions, could it be possible that the Dover Demon was something scouting out, a creature looking out from above the stars? Could that possibly explain why the creature was able to vanish so quickly? Was it just a remarkably sneaky little fella? Or is it possible that it was technologically advanced in some way, or being backed up by someone else who beamed it on back to whatever ship it came from? And finally, at our number 1 spot is the Flatwoods Monster, a creature that has long since thought to be alien in origin, and not a cryptid as some have said. The Flatwoods Monster was first sighted in West Virginia because of course it was. Everything creepy is in West Virginia. West Virginia is nothing but beautiful, the most picturesque mountains you've ever seen in your life, and horrifying monsters all the way down. John Denver forgot to tell you that part in them songs. The Flatwood Monster was described as being 10 feet tall and roughly 4 feet wide. It's described as being more mechanical in nature than it is organic, kind of a Darth Vader deal going on. Its most notable feature is its giant head with 2 gigantic glowing eyes, described as either bright red or bright green depending on who's telling the story, and it's got a giant cowl in the shape of a spade behind this big orb, making it look like a big weird alien vampire. Its body was armored with thick vertical pipes, and it's got spindly little arms. The first ever sighting of the Flatwood Monster was in the 50s, 1952 to be specific. 3 boys saw something flailing out of the sky, hitting the ground nearby. The boys went home, and one of them told their mother that they thought they'd seen something fall from the sky, maybe an asteroid, and they wanted some help to go check it out. Always a good idea to ask permission from your mom first if you're gonna go check out an alien. Stranger Things kids would have saved themselves so much trouble if they did that. They gathered a small search party together, you know, just in case, and the group gathered and sought out the farm where the object landed, and eventually made their way to the top of the hill, where they saw a large ball of fire and reported smelling some mist that was making their eyes burn. A person in the search party then noticed that there were 2 bright glowing green eyes that were floating around in the trees, and he flashed his light to unveil what was hiding in the dark. They were then treated to a full view of the Flatwood Monster in all of its horror. The creature then hissed at them and flew upwards into the night, never to be seen again. Now, over the years, detractors have claimed that the Flatwood Monster could just have been the darkness playing tricks on people's eyes, and that it could have been just a barn owl obscured by shadow. I definitely kind of see that. I see a similar enough face shape. Barn owls are kind of weird looking, but I feel like the size would be hard to misunderstand. Plus, that doesn't really explain off the mist that was making everyone's eyes burn, or the strange thing that fell from the sky. If you ask me, there's a lot more to say the Flatwood Monster is an alien than there is to say it's an owl. Number 5. The Loveland Frog. First up on our list is the Loveland Frog, a cryptid that was new to me but is very quickly winning my heart, and maybe he'll steal yours as well. The Loveland Frogman is a mythic humanoid frog that is a legend to the people of Loveland, Ohio, which is where the name comes from. The Frogman is described as a 4-foot bipedal frog, mostly appearing to hide around bodies of water. I mean, it's a frog. Where else is it gonna go? It was first sighted in 1955 by a businessman driving home alone at night. He was headed out towards Branch Hill in Ohio when he saw 3 strange short, squat, bizarre-looking creatures standing on their hind legs alongside the road. He described them all as being 3 to 4 feet tall with leathery-looking skin and faces just like a frog with giant glowing yellow eyes. The frogman would go quiet for a bit and wouldn't be seen again until 1972, when a local police officer was driving home and saw an unidentified 4-foot creature running in front of his car's headlights. When he got a good look at it, the officer described it as a leather-skinned bipedal animal crouching like a frog, and it hurriedly ran towards a river. 2 weeks after that sighting, another Loveland police officer reported seeing the same creature, the same little bipedal frog monster. This officer, however, shot at the frogman and discovered that what he found was a tailless iguana that had grown unusually large. Now, while for some, that was the end of the frogman legend, there are still sightings and reports to this day. As recent as 2016, people are still claiming that they see the Loveland frogman. To the people of Loveland, the frogman is something of a local hero. They love the guy, and I gotta be honest, I sincerely do too. There's something about this cryptid story that's really doing it for me. There's no stories about him eating anybody, the Loveland frog monster's not attacking anybody, he's just a happy little frog guy scurrying across the roads. I sincerely hope they're out there. And hey, you having fun on the channel? Drop a subscribe for new scary videos every single day, twice a day. Let's keep on going. Number 4. The Fresno nightcrawlers. Up next is the Fresno nightcrawlers, and let me just say right now, these are probably my favorite cryptid on the entire list. If I say another one is, I'm lying. It's these guys. Some cryptids are downright terrifying. Some cryptids will keep you up all night, and maybe these guys will too, but I personally find them downright adorable. These are the Fresno nightcrawlers, bizarre, rail-thin bipedal creatures with no discernible features whatsoever. The only footage we have of them is blurry security camera footage, which doesn't help identify the creatures much at all. They appear short with very, very long legs, almost stilt-like. The first reported sighting of one of the nightcrawlers came from a city in California, Fresno, where the name comes from. A man named Jose was at home late at night with his dog trying to get a good night's sleep, but was repeatedly disturbed by his dog barking at something out the window. He went over to quiet his dogs down and noticed something deeply bizarre on his security camera. He saw a pair of white, elongated creatures strolling down his lawn. The next morning he claims to have seen small footprints all over the lawn. The next sighting of the Nightwalkers was in Carmel, also in California. A former Marine and his wife were driving up a hill, and they claimed that they saw a 7-foot tall creature that they described as a thin, pale, armless white humanoid walking on by. What are the Nightwalkers? They're weirding me out. Are they aliens? Cryptid? Possessed pair of pants? If anyone's got a line, you let us know immediately. Whatever the Nightwalkers are, all I know is that I love them. I think they are downright adorable. I watched the clip of them walking down the hill like 30 times while I was writing this script, so just know that. Number 3. Skinwalkers. Now let's shift to one that's not adorable even a little bit. Skinwalkers are an extremely popular cryptid, a person with the ability to shapeshift into any creature they desire. Sometimes the legends state that in order to shapeshift, they need to molt out of their skin, and in some legends, they have to wear the pelt of the animal they intend to shapeshift into. You know, sometimes skinwalkers are presented as monstrous, sometimes humanoid. The recurring lines through every skinwalker stories, though, is that they are absolutely terrifying, and under no circumstances should you ever look one in the eyes, as it's said that looking one in the eyes will not only draw its attention, but seal your fate. So take a listen to this story from Reddit. This post came to us from a Reddit thread asking, what was the scariest thing that has ever happened to you? And an anonymous Redditor shared this story, and it's probably one of the scariest things I've ever read. Beginning. I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up gathering firewood from my grandmother because it was getting dark. We were driving back on a dirt road, and I had this awful sense of being watched. Before I could turn to look out my window, my uncle shouted, "Don't." My heart felt like it was gonna beat out of my chest, and I heard a tap on the window. My uncle sped up and started praying in our native language. I didn't know what was going on, and I thought it was over until our truck dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying, "Look at me and don't turn away," over and over. And then I heard it again, tapping from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe, and I wanted to cry. A minute or two passed, and the truck dipped. My uncle looked at me and said, "We'll ask your father to do a prayer in the morning so that the evil will forget our faces." Naturally, Other people on Reddit were kind of terrified about that story since it's sending a chill down my spine, and they asked him what he thought it was, and the Redditor said simply that he thought it was possibly a Skinwalker. What more is there to say? Number 2. The Flatwood Monster. The Flatwood Monster is another West Virginia native, and I've gotta ask, why are there so many cryptid stories coming out of West Virginia? I've never been there, so maybe somebody can clear this up, because all I know about West Virginia is anything John Denver sang about, and he didn't mention Mothman or the Flatwood Monster, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, the Flatwood Monster is a cryptid that's been thought to be an extraterrestrial in nature. It was reported to be 10 feet tall and roughly 4 feet wide. It's described as wearing some sort of mechanical suit like it's Darth Vader rather than a purely organical being, and its most notable feature is its giant bulbous head with 2 gigantic eyes glowing green. It's got a big cowl in the shape of a spade behind it that makes it look a bit like it's an alien vampire, and its body was thick, armored, and it has small, spindly little arms like a T-Rex. Now, the Flatwood Monster's first sighting dates all the way back to 1952, when 3 local boys saw a shining light falling across the sky, eventually hitting the ground nearby at a local farm. The boys returned home to report that they'd seen a UFO crash land and told one of their moms to get a search party going, and honestly, that is exactly what I would do if I ever saw an alien. I would probably still call my mom, to be honest, if I ever saw an alien. From there, they gathered a small search party to go to the farm to approach what they saw. When they reached the top of the hill, they saw a large pulsating ball of fire and smelled a mist that was making their eyes burn. Someone in the search party noticed 2 small lights and flashed his light quickly at them, revealing a creature standing 10 feet tall with glowing green eyes. The creature hissed at them, then glid upwards and head off into the night. What was the Flatwood Monster? Some skeptics have speculated that those eyes could have been that of a barn owl, and the face does kind of light up. The shadow was disguising it, so it would make sense. But that begs to ask, what was the mist? And what was the thing that fell from the sky? Was the Flatwood Monster an alien? And is it just me, or is the Flatwood Monster just the tiniest bit adorable as well? I know it's kind of terrifying, and its bug eyes are gonna haunt my dreams, but does anyone else think it looks a little huggable? Shaped like a friend? Number 1. Mothman. Mothman is arguably one of the most famous cryptids of all time, and it's captured our heart since he started flapping around in popularity. Mothman's first ever recorded sighting was in 1966 in West Virginia, when 5 men were in a cemetery prepping for a funeral when they saw something bizarre rustling around in the trees nearby, and lifting off was a massive brown-winged creature that disappeared into the night, far too large and unwieldy to be a bird. From there, the legend of the Mothman began to rise. It would get spotted frequently throughout West Virginia and the surrounding states, but its home is West Virginia. 3 days later, after the first sighting of the Mothman, on November 5th, 1966, another sighting occurred. Roger and Linda Scarberry were driving with their friends, another couple, Steve and Mary Millette, around midnight. While driving, the couples noticed that amidst the darkness there were glowing eyes that seemed to be hovering around them. They stalled the car a bit, unnerved about who these mysterious eyes could have belonged to, and through the darkness and the headlights of the car, they saw a creature that stood 7 feet tall with leathery wings folded against its back. The creature began to pursue them rapidly, matching the speed of the car at around 100 miles an hour. They tried to turn around to get a better look at the thing, but the creature screeched and flew upwards into the sky when it was hit by its headlights. Now, this would be far from the last sighting of the Mothman. Since these early sightings, Mothman has been reported hundreds of times across West Virginia. He's practically a pillar of the community. I think he's allowed to vote. Some say he's a benevolent figure who wants to help people and warn them of dangers around, whereas others say that he's a more mysterious, nefarious agent, flying around sending people to their doom. There's an allegation that Mothman was involved in the destruction of a bridge in 1967 that led to the death of 40 people. Some survivors claim that they saw the Mothman flying around overhead after the collapse. Whether he's real, a West Virginian legend, a friend or a foe, there's no denying that like a moth to a flame, we're drawn to the story of the Mothman.